Are sea vegetables a good health choice even though they have salt? Also, are you concerned that they have radiation or heavy metals since they were in the ocean after the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident?
Um, I try not to get sea vegetables from the West Coast. Um, it's hard to explain now in Israel because we're still using up our nori and things like that from the West, from Maine coast sea vegetables, okay, which is pretty well. So um, all the oceans to a certain extent are polluted. I believe the sea vegetables from the West Coast all the way to Japan have more radiation, and I think you want to avoid that. I would say it that way. Now, salt, different thing. People need a certain amount of salt depending on their constitution. Lots of people need a lot more salt. Now, what do we call salt? I don't call sodium chloride salt. Okay, and that you're going to get in sea vegetables because it's from the sea. But there is sea salt, which is a condensation, but there's also salt from the Himalayas. It's got 82 minerals. That's a value because most people aren't getting enough minerals in their diet. So I think there's a role for something like, one I use is like scalar salt, but it's been energized. Salt's a crystal, so it's good that you can energize it. So I think everybody needs a certain amount, but 82 mineral salt, not sodium chloride, which is really not so good for you. And I think, again, in our rush to kind of be perfect, we're not looking at, well, is there a difference between sodium chloride and 82 mineral salt that are highly energized? So I also recommend more earth-based salt, like from the Himalayas, versus from the oceans, because of the radiation, because of the high amount of pollution now in all our oceans. So I stay away from sea-based salts, but I will use things like nori. I mean, one of my favorite meals, which I had today, is 2 nori sheets and a salad with avocado. Wrap it up. So that's and it's a nice variation. It's good to vary your food a little bit so people don't get bored. So that's how I feel about the salt. So I'll just condense it down to, I don't recommend sodium chloride at all. It's not really salt, it's a chemical. I recommend earth-based salt like the Himalayan salts. And sea vegetables, I think it's important to wash and soak to get out some of the things. And I avoid it from the Pacific Ocean. And I think in time it's going to be all the oceans. But at this moment, I'm still having some sea vegetables from different places that are not from the Pacific.
Are raw seeds, including pumpkin, sunflower, sesame, flax, chia, hemp, and poppy, ideal to include in our salads 7 days a week, 365 days a year for life? Do you need to limit the quantity, or can you have as much as you like?
So I use all of those and vary them per day. So that's when I did. The nuts and seeds have lots of nutrition in them. And I soak them, so it amplifies the nutrition. So, but everybody's different. Some people need more and some people need less. We have to kind of use some wisdom about what works for us, what we can, because nuts and seeds are also higher in fat. If you're a person that's not so good with fat, can't have too much nuts and seeds. If you have a person that's a little liver trouble, it's going to stress the liver. So we have to use our judgment about it, but they also contain a certain amount of protein. I have observed, because I'm going to go right to the protein question, that a lot of live fooders and vegans who haven't developed over time, so to speak, actually can get a little protein deficient. And when I added the blue-green algae, I think I was getting less than 10%. Maybe I was getting 8% protein. So when I just had 1 tablespoon, suddenly my physiology improved. Just that much. Some people I've observed who are what we call high protein eaters, that's 70% of the population, they may need 2 tablespoons of protein concentrate per meal. I'm a person that doesn't eat much. I may need 1 tablespoon per day. So there are real variations. So I'm going to keep making the point that we aren't a bunch of cows. We are unique individuals. We have unique life cycles that we're in. And we have to eat according to our constitution and our life cycle, needing more or less protein at different points in time. But most people I've seen who are live food vegans and also vegans tend to be a little bit protein deficient. And usually I'm going to recommend some kind of protein concentrate that balances them. That's just what I've observed. I'm not saying that was a research. It's a clinical experience over the years that almost everybody needs it. And unless we're going to eat lots of food, which stresses our body, that's a very simple way to do it. Spirulina, chlorella, blue-green algae, things like that. So that's really what I recommend in the bigger picture. But most people tend, unless you're eating a whole lot of food, tend to be a little bit on the protein deficient side.
Is it healthier to eat sprouts or vegetables? For example, should we choose broccoli or broccoli sprouts, cabbage or cabbage sprouts, radish or radish sprouts?
I like both. I love radishes. It's very good. Radishes actually stimulate your biome to come into an optimal balance. So I have a lot of radishes. I must have 4 radishes for lunch today. Where I am, it's into the evening. Okay. So the point I'm making is we don't have to make that distinction. We can do both. You need to be happy about what you're eating. I love sprouts, and they have the highest amount of biophoton energy, which is what I've talked about in my different books. So sprouts have the highest amount, especially if it's within a few days, like fresh sprouts. So if I have to choose between the two, I'm gonna go with sprouts because they have the highest amount of life force. And from my point of view, we're eating not just material, but we're eating energy, and we're adding to our energy. So that's the slant I take on it. And when you sprout food, it also creates, it's like a different food than the regular food. And there's not only a lot more energy, but a lot more nutrients in sprouting.
You say low cholesterol is a risk, but how do you increase your cholesterol if you eat a raw plant-based diet and you naturally have lower cholesterol levels? Does plant-based fats like olives, avocados, raw seeds, and raw nuts raise your cholesterol to a higher level?
Not necessarily. Coconut oil does, though. And I have found that, because again, you need a certain amount of cholesterol to make your brain work right, your body work right. Okay, it's a given. Also, low cholesterol is associated with high rates of depression. I even learned that at Columbia Medical School in the 60s. So it's like, okay, we got that. Now, what's the point? You need at least a cholesterol of 150. Okay. If you're below that, I will give people coconut oil until it gets back up there above 150. It could be 1 to 3 tablespoons a day until their cholesterol is up. And then I find the optimum to maintain that.
Do you recommend raw sprouted beans like chickpeas, lentils, and lima beans as a part of an ideal raw food diet?
I don't call it ideal, but what I'll say is it's good to have as much variation that makes you happy. So I think it's it's okay to have those sprouted things, but they still tend to have digestive blocking. and enzymes. So it helps, it blocks your digestion a little bit.
Do you recommend raw sprouted whole grains such as quinoa, millet, teff, amaranth, and buckwheat as part of an ideal raw food diet?
So millet and buckwheat are actually seeds, but for convention, we call them grains. I don't do a lot of grains, okay? It's higher in carbohydrates. But if you're going to do it, sprouting is a good idea. But I'm not recommending grains as part of my optimal diet. But a lot of people need it because it gives some grounding. If you're a Vata constitution, you need more grounding. So you need grains, a little bit of grains and oil. But for me, not much.
Are all fruits healthy? Are some too sugary due to hybridization and not being a native to our area, such as pineapples, mangoes, seedless grapes, bananas? And does fruit feed cancer since it has sugar in it? Which fruits are perfect to eat?
Well, again, perfect is assuming there's a total balance. But for your different people's constitution, I looked at the whole thing, and I kind of look at, because I do a lot of work with treating and healing diabetes type 2, I'm looking at what's going to raise your blood sugar. So what I found in all the studies, and there aren't that many studies, okay, there aren't that many. What I found is that blueberries, bilberries, and green apples, in about the 8 studies I saw, okay, which is all the studies I could find, they didn't seem to raise the blood sugar. So I'm looking at, does this raise the blood sugar? Is this going to aggravate diabetes? So those 3 weren't shown to raise the blood sugar. Now, I have goji berries. Well, I don't really have a blood sugar problem, but the point is, goji berries have a different cycle. They initially raise it, but then they lower it in the long run. So I add goji berries to that story. Personally, if I'm going to eat a little bit of fruit, it would be like blueberries. Besides my goji berries, it would be blueberries are what I enjoy having, but I don't eat a whole lot. You maybe understand that food is not the center of my life, right? Food is a way of taking in a certain amount of energy, but so does breathing exercises, so does the tree yoga, so does meditation. Meditation is my basic food.
A recent study claimed vegans have more bone fractures. Is this true?
I would question that. Other studies have suggested vegans have stronger bones, but their bones are more flexible. So you're going to have less fractures. But, one study doesn't make it. But as I look at all the picture, it is, I wouldn't say that's true. What I will say is that meat eaters tend to have about 4 times more osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is associated with bone fractures. So women who are meat eaters have 36% have osteoporosis, but vegan women have 9%. Vegan meat eating men have 18%. Vegan men have about 3% osteoporosis. Why is that? Because the calcium, the phosphorus in the meat is pulling the calcium off. But the best prevention is anti-gravity exercise, not complicated. It's called walk every day. So, there's nothing complicated. I mean, we weren't designed to have to be complicated. So what I will say is that meat eating, meat, fish, chicken, and dairy are associated with greater rates of osteoporosis. Therefore, you would see them associated with greater rates of bone fractures as well.